A few months ago, I ran a poll asking you guys one simple question. Who is the leader of the fourth generation? And the comments section went wild. Everyone had different answers for different reasons. Some brought up YouTube views, others mentioned Instagram followers, and plenty of people said that it's completely subjective. Is it really just an opinion though, or can we actually answer this objectively? In this video, we're putting our bias to the side and looking at the data, which include chart rankings, day songs, album sales, and other achievements, and we're going group by group, tallying up the totals and settling this debate once and for all. Now, who actually deserves to be in this conversation? Off the top of my head, I.O.I has to be in the discussion. If you look at their debut era, it was easily one of the most memorable in 4th gen history. Even though I wasn't into K-pop back then, when I finally got into the scene years later, I was hooked on songs like Dala Dala, Wannabe, Loco, and Mafia in the Morning. So if we're talking about pure nostalgia and iconic hits, I.O.I absolutely deserves a spot. Then we have LE SSERAFIM. They entered the scene right in the middle of the 4th generation explosion, 2022, which I would consider the best year for debuts, and have stayed near the top ever since. But looking back at all the videos I've made featuring them, they're always hovering towards the upper echelon, but rarely snatching that #1 spot. It's actually kind of wild, considering their global reach is easily one of the strongest among girl groups today. Even so, their sheer consistency makes them an absolute non-negotiable for this list. I.D.le is another huge name to consider. As the oldest group on this list, they were actually among the first to kick off the 4th generation. They've come a long way since then, dropping hits that truly reshaped the industry. Think of Tomboy, Queen Card, and Fate, and people rarely bring up their debut era, mainly because it didn't have that instant explosive impact that I.O.I had. But from 2018 all the way to today, I.D.le has maintained a level of sustained success that very few can match. The group that easily had the most explosive potential though was NewJeans. They were actually the group that got me into K-pop in the first place, so when it comes to pure nostalgia, they always win me over. Within just 2 short years, they completely took over the entire industry, and that ripple effect is still being felt today. In fact, many fans consider them the blueprint of the 5th generation, inspiring so many new groups to adopt similar concepts. And remember, they dropped out of nowhere with 0 pre-debut teasers, so all of that massive initial hype was 100% genuine. Now with their return on the horizon, the real question is, can they recreate that same impact? We'll just have to wait and see. I.O.I is another group that has shown insane non-stop consistency since day one, from 11, Love Dive, and I Am, all the way to XOXZ and Bang Bang. They just pump out hit after hit, and alongside I.D.le, they prove that you don't need the resources of a Big 4 agency to dominate the industry at the absolute highest level. And then of course there's aespa, which shouldn't come as much of a surprise to anyone. Right now you can easily argue that they sit at the absolute top of the K-pop world, especially after that insane run they had back in 2024. They've practically never had a down year. Between non-stop hits, they're pretty much always on tour, and on an individual level, have been the talk of the town. Some fans even argue that they're the closest group we have to reaching the likes of Blackpink. And honestly, looking at the trajectory, it's hard to disagree. I mean, who else if not them? So those are the 6 groups in today's lineup. While there are plenty of other incredible groups to consider, none have matched the sustained dominance of these 6. And just a quick side note before anybody brings up boy groups in the comments, girl groups are my niche, so if you want boy groups, you won't find them here. Anyway, let's talk about I.O.I first. Like I've mentioned before, they are one of those groups that have really dominated the scene when they first debuted, and were so good that they have achieved the Rookie Grand Slam, which basically means they won all the major rookie awards, and from my research, only a handful of groups have obtained such an achievement, which makes it even more impressive. But also, that's an award that you can only win once in your career, which to me gives it a lot more weight. Now, I've seen some arguments about who is ITZY's competition at the time, so all of the groups that you see on here weren't around, with the exception of i-dle, of course, but obviously they wouldn't be contending for that award due to them debuting the year prior. So some people might say that it was an easy grand slam. So I'll let you decide how you take that, but regardless, it's one of the most difficult achievements in K-pop. Now, throughout their entire career, they have won almost 50 music show wins. Again, a lot of that comes from their earlier work, with them only winning a few in the past few years. So just based on that alone, we can tell that ITZY aren't as dominant as they used to be, as music show wins are a strong indication of fan support. Not to say that MIDZY aren't showing up, because I still think they are one of the most loyal fan bases, but clearly it's just not on the same level as the other groups we're about to cover. Regardless, they do have an impressive amount of wins. Let's look at chart numbers. Pretty much every title track from their first few years have reached the #1 spot domestically, which is an incredible run. Today, it's not even in contention. I talk about it more in my past videos, but from what I remember, they are really struggling today. But even during their dominating debut era, they've never achieved a perfect all kill, which is the achievement of reaching #1 for a song simultaneously on all major domestic platforms. Now, if we want to look at their album sales, they've sold an astonishing 7.4 million units, which is mighty impressive, so they are definitely money makers. But when it comes to accolades, they fall really short. I mean, look at this. They have 0 day songs throughout their entire career. And I know you're gonna Google it and see this, but this is not a day song. There are like a couple social media posts stating that it is, but if you dig deeper, it's just a fan award by i-dle Champ. And that's one of the most annoying things about making these videos, and that's trying to find the correct information, as a ton of social media pages misinterpret the caliber of these awards, or some of these sites are just flat out outdated. So I had to go through a lot of trial and error just to find the correct info. Anyway, they have 0 day songs, right? That's not to say that they weren't in the race for one, as they have been nominated for quite a few years, but just never pulled it off. But keep in mind, the Day Song is an award that considers everyone across the industry, regardless of generation. And in the early days of ITZY, the titans of the 3rd generation were still dominating. That includes Blackpink, Twice, and Red Velvet, so that's another element to consider. But what about Bond songs? These are a lot easier to win compared to the Day Song, and it's just a tier below in value. But also, these kind of awards are given in greater quantities at every award show. Like, it's still impressive, but it's not as rare as the Day Song. So for ITZY, they only have 6. Some of these groups that we're about to talk about win like several every year, so looking at the bigger picture, ITZY already doesn't look as impressive as I initially imagined. Like, they were off to a strong start, but have never reached the absolute top across their career. But welcome to a conclusion at the end of the video. Like I've mentioned a bit earlier, LE SSERAFIM are one of those groups that comes to mind when talking about being consistently on top every single year, but have always struggled on the accolade side of things, at least domestically. Granted, they are a younger group compared to ITZY in terms of tenure, but from the looks of things, they are pretty much on par with ITZY. For instance, they both have similar units sold at almost 7.5 million copies. They both also have 0 perfect all kills achieved, but LE SSERAFIM has 7 of their songs reach the #1 spot on domestic charts, and having 3 extra Bond songs under their belt. Even this sort of surprised me, considering how dominant they were with Perfect Night, Crazy, and a lot of their earlier work. Now, ITZY does have the upper hand on the music show wins, but LE SSERAFIM are picking up more wins as of late, whereas, like I mentioned earlier, ITZY are struggling. So in that sense, LE SSERAFIM could catch up soon. Now, one thing that ITZY has that LE SSERAFIM has not achieved is the Rookie Grand Slam. And looking at it closer, LE SSERAFIM were also part of one of the strongest rookie classes in K-pop history, and that was in 2022, with most of those groups still dominating the industry today. And if we look at ITZY's rookie class, it's just not on the same level. And at the time, Born Pink was in full effect, which I think was Blackpink's strongest comeback, so really the competition was very steep in 2022. And finally, LE SSERAFIM sets themselves apart with 2 day song wins, which they've only picked up recently, so to me this just further emphasizes that their numbers could look even more impressive down the road, considering that they're only on their 4th year. As the oldest group on here, i-dle are one of the last few groups that are still active, while being past their initial contract expiration of 7 years, with I.O.I being the most recent to join that status. But I never really hear anybody ever talk about their debut era. Like when fans talk about I.O.I, they typically bring up Tomboy, Nude, and of course Queen Card, so it feels more like their prime era was in the middle of their career. That being said, they have shown major success across the board with 73 music show wins, with pretty much every comeback bringing in multiple wins. So they are showing signs of strong consistency, and the fact that they are the oldest group on here makes it a lot more impressive in my book. They've also had 13 songs hit the #1 spot on domestic charts, with Queen Card being their biggest hit, staying on top for 4 weeks straight. And out of those, they have achieved 4 perfect all kills, so already they are looking more impressive than both I.O.I and LE SSERAFIM. Now, one area where they share some similarity is with the sales of their albums, sitting at just 7.2 million units sold across their career. Now, they also have not achieved the rookie Grand Slam like I.O.I did, but they were 2 wins short, as they did pick up 3 major wins, but unfortunately I.O.I's 1 got in their way, which is another group that I recall being very dominant at the time. Now, I.Dle does have the lead with total bond songs, which sits at 12, and finally have a total of 5 day songs, all of which were obtained from the last 2 years, which shows that they were actually more dominant towards the end of their initial 7 years. So comparing these three, I.Dle clearly has the lead, and it's not just within their numbers, but also if we take their tenure into consideration, it shows us how long they have dominated the 4th generation. So right now, they look like a strong contender. NewJeans is a group that I believe to have that once-in-a-lifetime potential. Just recently, they've reached their 4th anniversary, which is kind of sad to think about, as I still remember their debut days like it was yesterday. They were also active for about 2 years or so, and within that short time frame, they have achieved what most could not in 7 years, which, like I said, is the typical contract period. Off the rip, they already surpassed the previous 3 groups in terms of albums sold, which just blows my mind that they were able to sell that much in a few years, coming in with over 8.5 million units. This tells us that NewJeans were a gold mine in terms of revenue. Now, the performances of their songs on an individual level were also crushing the charts. Now, of course, they don't have as many songs as the rest of the groups on here because of their short tenure, but still, we can't deny their impact. They have 8 songs that have gone #1 domestically and have obtained 2 perfect all kills. Now, the only area where they have the disadvantage are with the music show wins, with just 36. But again, if we take time into consideration, that's still really damn good. So if you're still not convinced that they belong in this conversation, this is the part where they really shine, and that's that they have a colossal 14 bond songs accompanied by an insane 11 day songs. You heard that right, 11. A lot of groups would only win maybe a few, and more would never obtain one across their career, but they have entered the double digits for the highest honor in all of K-pop, and for a time they were the leaders of the 4th generation in terms of total day songs, but I'm sure you can guess who surpassed them later on, but we'll get to that in a moment. And finally, the only piece that they are missing to absolute perfection is the Rookie Grand Slam, which they won 4 out of the 5 awards to reach such a status, only for it to be taken by I.O.I. And even though I.O.I debuted a year prior, they debuted in December, which my guess would take it as they just got rolled over to the 2022 contention, which is another factor that not a lot of people take into consideration, and that's that groups can debut at any time during the year, and the same can be said about these award shows. Some of them happen early in the year, halfway through the year, but most of them towards the end of the year, which I think should become the standard. Regardless, I think NewJeans were ruling the K-pop world when they were active, and it felt like they conquered, because they were sweeping so many award shows and killing it on the charts. Now, they still remain as one of the biggest what-ifs in the world of K-pop. Like, if they have never gone on such a hiatus, could they have been even more dominant? I think so, as it really feels like their fandom was growing rapidly, and every comeback was a huge success, and I'm really glad that I got to see all of that. They did announce a comeback happening soon, which is amazing, but Danielle is no longer in the picture, which I think could impact how fans support them in the future, as I do believe that she was a major piece of NewJeans. Even still, I doubt that they'll be on the lower end of the industry, but I'll save that convo for a future video. IVE are one of those giants in the K-pop industry that always find their way into contention for the throne, and I feel like a lot of fans don't really give them a lot of credit for their rookie era, as to me they were just as iconic as ITZY's debut. Think of 11, Afterlike, and Love Dive, and so forth. All of them became instant classics among the fourth generation. Now, let's take a look at their numbers. On the sell side of things, nobody comes close, as they have sold almost 13.5 million units, which is outstanding. And just like New Jeans, they were just one win away from obtaining the Rookie Grand Slam, as they have also won 4 out of the 5 necessary. So again, ITZY is unmatched for that title, but also keep in mind the competition around the 2022 era was unforgiving. Another area where they also dominate is on the charts. They have 13 songs reach the number 1 spot, with 6 of them earning the coveted perfect all kill. This is a stat that really proves their dominance year over year, and their consistency makes them stand out even further. Even in 2024, when they didn't get any music show wins, they still managed to hit number 1, which is great. Speaking of music show wins, they lead by a large margin with 83 wins. At this rate, I think they are on the path to reaching 100 wins by the end of their contracts, and if they decide to extend, I think they could keep it going. But even so, I think it would take a while for anybody else on here to catch up with them, with i-dle being the closest. As for Bond songs, they are also one of the few to reach double digits, but more impressively, they lead with 23 wins. And for the cherry on top, their 10 Daesong wins make their resume look practically flawless. I mean, similar to New Jeans, they have basically achieved everything at a high level while being inches away from winning the Grand Slam. And for our final group, aespa. They are also one of the highest selling groups on here with over 11 million units sold, an impressive number of music show wins at 53, but clearly a good distance from IVE's 83. And across their career, they have 11 songs reach number 1 domestically, but only achieving the perfect all kill twice, which surprised even me. Now, they also have one of the most Bond songs, which sits them at 18, and the one area that nobody even on here matches them is with Daesongs, as they have an astronomical 16 wins, with 13 of them being achieved in their Supernova and Armageddon era, which was their prime. You guys cannot convince me otherwise. I remember covering that year, and what they have done was such a shooting star moment, and I'm very glad that I got to witness every minute of it. Within that era, they achieved being the first girl group in history to win 3 of the 4 Daesongs in a single ceremony at the Melon Music Awards, the first girl group to sweep the Song of the Year category at all the Big 4 award shows, and have joined one of the few to win a Daesong at all Big 4 ceremonies within the same year. Now, while there isn't like an official Grand Slam for Daesongs, if there was one, they would have achieved it no problem. Oh, and hold on a minute. Speaking of Grand Slams, you thought ITZY were the only ones on here that won that? Wrong. aespa has also achieved this, which makes them the only perfect group in this entire video. Not only did they achieve everything, but they've also made history, and that just can't be denied regardless how you want to look at it. Alright, now that we have all the information in front of us, we can clearly see that both ITZY and LE SSERAFIM are pretty much on the same level. I mean, none of them have any perfect all kills, they both have the lowest amount of Daesongs, with ITZY being the only one without one. They also have the lowest amount of Bond songs, lowest music show wins and album sales, so pretty much everything is on the lower end, at least compared to the rest of the groups on here. And again, I really want to emphasize that even though that's the case, they are still superior to a lot of other groups that weren't mentioned. So they are on that top shelf, of course, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to figure out who is at the very top. Now, between ITZY and LE SSERAFIM, who would I pick? Kind of tough considering that they are so close to each other, and even though LE SSERAFIM has 2 Daesongs, I think the fact that ITZY has a Grand Slam does make them look more impressive. LE SSERAFIM weren't really as close as the other groups on here when it comes to winning that title, so that's another factor. But again, if we take time into account, ITZY has been around for a full contract tenure, which again is 7 years, whereas LE SSERAFIM are only 4 years in, so that's another angle. But I think with how things look today, LE SSERAFIM do have the potential to surpass ITZY down the road. For example, they are winning more music show wins on average. They've recently won those Daesongs, so what I'm saying is LE SSERAFIM more than likely will surpass ITZY pretty soon, but right now it's kinda even. I still think it's a toss-up, but if I really had to pick, I'd probably go with LE SSERAFIM more so because they achieved about the same in half the time. But if you want to give ITZY the edge for their Grand Slam, that's totally fair. Now, let's shift over to i-dle. This is definitely a step up as they have one of the highest music show wins on here, which towers over ITZY and LE SSERAFIM's wins. They got more day songs, more Bond songs, more number one hits, and have 4 perfect all kills. I mean, they just have more of everything. However, I was a bit surprised to see that they have the lowest amount of sales, but even then, it's not that much of a gap between ITZY and LE SSERAFIM. They are also missing that Grand Slam title, but we're just one win closer than LE SSERAFIM. i-dle definitely looks far more impressive, and with them being the oldest group here, they look pretty solid, but once we get into NewJeans territory, things look far different. Between these two, we see both one of the first and one of the last groups to debut within the 4th generation, and just comparing these two side by side, we can clearly see how much of a greater impact NewJeans has had in just 2 years compared to i-dle's, 8 years now? I mean, it does look kind of close in some areas like perfect all kills, no grand slams, and maybe even number one songs, but 11 day songs in 2 years? I don't see how anybody could top that. And also 8.5 million copies? Yeah, they were up next for real, like I'm talking Blackpink status. Now obviously they've been away for 2 years, and I've always wondered if that never happened, could they have been even greater? Possibly. Another thing to consider is the competition, like who was around when NewJeans debuted. Many people would argue that they were part of one of the greatest rookie classes in K-pop history, which I find to be valid. I mean, 2 of them are on here, and even though IVE debuted in 2021, it was in December, so when NewJeans debuted, IVE were also up against them. But that 2022 class was gargantuan, with many of those groups still thriving today, but at the same time, it really felt like a bloodbath. Think of Fearless, Attention, Love Dive, and despite all of that, NewJeans were only 1 win away from the Grand Slam. So what I'm saying is, NewJeans had possibly the best debut among the 4th generation. And I know people will say ITZY, but think about it. Who were they up against? IVE wasn't around, LE SSERAFIM wasn't around, NewJeans wasn't around, hell, not even aespa was around. So that Grand Slam that they won doesn't look as impressive in my book. And again, I'm talking about their rookie class here. People would say ITZY were the next Blackpink, which I respect, but what happened in 2022? Born Pink, which I would argue was Blackpink's best comeback. And I know Kill This Love came out in 2019, which is another one of their strongest comebacks, and ITZY was a strong contender, don't get it twisted. And some people might even say that that was the tail end of Twice's prime. But all I'm saying is NewJeans had more competition and were able to achieve more. So if we take that into consideration, debut era's competition, NewJeans surpasses all 3 of the previous groups. Now, this is where things get a lot more intense. If we look at every category, IVE has the lead in pretty much everything. And looking across their entire career, they've consistently been the most impressive. I think they are coming up at about 5 years now, so they definitely have great tenure. And for a lot of these groups, I don't think they could catch up anytime soon, as IVE has way too much of a lead, at least from top to bottom. And after all these years, they remain at the very top of the industry today, which is great. And finally, aespa. Like I said a moment ago, they are the only one here who has a perfect resume, as they literally have every achievement including the Grand Slam. However, the great majority of their success was during their 2024 era, which had Supernova, Armageddon, Whiplash, and Hot Mess. I still can't believe how many of you guys slept on Hot Mess. That song was fucking awesome. But seriously, that was their shooting star moment, and they've basically been at the very top since then. If we want to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, aespa has always been pretty strong, but not as much as IVE, and it's really damn close. Now, who do I pick as the leader of the 4th generation? I think if we really want to talk about total domination, consistency, competition, and if we want to look at it from debut to today, I just might have to give it to aespa. I mean, think about it, right? That 2024 run has left a mark on the industry, and today they are still at the top. But also, think of their debut era, right? It was right in between ITZY in their prime and just before one of the strongest rookie classes in K-pop history. So they've been a part of the fourth generation at its height, and are also the only ones here with a perfect resume. Now, I could see a strong argument for IVE. They do have more consistent success across their career compared to anybody on here, and just like aespa, today they are one of the giants in the industry. But again, they don't have the Grand Slam and have less day songs than aespa, but if you want to pick IVE, I wouldn't be mad. Now, they do have that big hole on their resume for 2024 where they didn't achieve any music show wins or day songs, whereas aespa has never had a down year to that effect. And even though aespa falls slightly short everywhere else compared to IVE, I have no doubt that they could catch up in the coming years. I could even see an argument for New Jeans considering that explosive debut era where they dominated at the pinnacle of the fourth generation, but again, assuming they've never gone on hiatus, we just wouldn't know what they could have been like today. I mean, do you think they could have stopped aespa from pulling off that miracle in 2024? I guess we'll never know the answer to that, so that remained speculative. But yeah, for me, it's between IVE and aespa, with aespa taking the slight edge. The rest of the groups still notable, and hey, look, who knows what'll happen in a few years from now? Things could look a lot different, and I might have to make an updated version. But as of today, I will crown aespa as the leader of the fourth generation. So there we go. The video can stop right there, but if you want more of an explanation in case you are going through this list carefully, there are a few different ways to really approach this conversation. For example, I know some people will only consider the major platforms like Melon, Hanteo, and Circle Chart when it comes to number ones, and if that were the case, then a lot of these groups would have like little to no songs reach such a level. But for this video, I consider the rest of the platforms like Bugs and Genie because those platforms are required for groups to earn a perfect all kill. You could land number one on Melon, but if you don't land number one on the other platforms, then you won't qualify for the pack. So that's something we need to take into consideration when verifying songs that have reached number one on domestic charts. The same thing can be said about day songs and bond songs. I know a lot of you guys only consider wins from major award shows as well, which again would cut down a lot of the wins on here for everybody. But I did it because K-pop is an ever evolving industry, and with it growing rapidly over the past few years, it's inevitable that more shows are going to award these prizes. For example, KGMA was established in 2024, the Asia Star Entertainer Awards as well, Hanteo in 2023, and so forth. And I think it's a good thing because it allows more groups the possibility to achieve such awards. I mean, there's way too many groups anyways, so I only see it as a win-win. And if you look at the categories, I have it weighted from the most difficult at the top to the least at the bottom, with day songs and grand slams being the most difficult achievement. With day songs, you have to go up against the entire industry, which includes soloists, boy groups, and groups from other generations. Grand slams, you only get one shot at earning that title, but it's limited to rookies, so there isn't as much competition. Packs are really hard to get because you have to reach number one on multiple domestic platforms, and it's so hard to maintain that they are even measured in hours. Bond songs, not super difficult, they're mostly top 10 awards, but they're definitely harder than music show wins, which every group has a chance to win on a weekly basis. And as for sales, anybody can sell, so not really the most difficult if at all. Alright, so that concludes this video. Now, I am curious, with all that information in front of you, who would you guys consider the leader of the fourth generation? I'd really love to know your thoughts down in the comments, and keep in mind, all of this information could look different as time passes by, so one day I might have to remake it, and I might even make one for the fifth generation if you guys want me to, even though it's still too early. Anyway, I really appreciate you guys watching, and until next time, take care.